Okay. This is Bianco 3 Secrets. So this level is for a beginner, and this is a tutorial pretty much only for beginners. Like your first step into learning movement, really, in the game. You know, it doesn't have flood in it, so it's a bit easier, fewer options. It's quite a simple stage. It has cycles you have to learn to navigate, and so it's kind of like an introduction into all of the stuff that you learn as a speedrunner in getting good movements and getting skilled at the game. So I wanted to take the opportunity to sort of teach it proper. Sort of see if I can give people a good grounding in movement fundamentals, as well as teaching the how it applies to this level, right? So that's what I'm going to do. The first section, the first section of this tutorial is going to be the basics. So I'm just going to basically teach how to do the level, the basic strats here, and the things to think about. And yeah, I remember still vividly, like this was one of the first levels I tried to learn, and I remember all the things I got stuck on because they weren't covered by any of the tutorials. And so I'm going to do my best to actually cover all of them here. So the very first thing you absolutely have to do, you see this cutscene, skip it. So the standard technique for skipping cutscenes in RTA, so anything where you're using the disc, you're playing on disc, right? The standard technique, because you don't know how long the load is going to be, you can't time a cutscene skip, so you just mash. And you mash with 2 thumbs on A and B because each of those inputs is going to skip on the relevant frame, and so you kind of get into a pattern where you mash like this. So like this. And you know, ideally a cutscene skip, the amount of frames you can see the cutscene on is 13, I think. I've actually forgotten, but actually a simple way of telling if you've done it correctly is with try and get timer. Basically, on this frame, it should be between 1.98 and 200. Yeah, whatever. I won't overcomplicate it. Basically, my point is, right, you want to mash here in order to skip the cutscene because the level itself starts when the timer starts at 0. So the cutscene is playing, everything in the level is moving already, and so the later you mash, the later you're going to be not just in the speedrun, you're going to lose time on the cutscene, but you're also going to be behind on the cycle relative to where you should be. And so it's really important to be like steadfast about mashing through the cutscene so that you can get started as soon as possible on the level, or otherwise you'll find that a lot of the cycles that you're trying to make and that are just out of reach, if you just mash better, they start to become within reach. And so for a beginner, this is like something that really trips people up, I think, and I always notice it when I watch beginners, that they don't mash the cutscene properly, and so that is the first tip. Just a sec. Alright. So we mash the cutscene and then we start the level, so I'll just make a save state here. At the beginning of the level, we're going to hold up, and ideally you want to tap the camera backwards a little bit, so like this much is perfect. Zoom the camera out by tapping back on the C stick. I won't blame you if you don't do that as a beginner. There is one particular point in the level where it's very useful to do this, which I'll show in a sec. But yeah, it is nice if you can do it, but obviously if you're scared that you need to focus on your inputs and this will just add an additional input, like I remember that's how I felt when I was starting out, then fair enough, you don't have to zoom the camera out. And also because, you know, if you fidget with the stick, you can input left or right slightly and kind of then have to correct that, which can throw you off. That's a risk if you're zooming the camera out. But other than that, yeah, zoom the camera out if you can. After that, right, we're going to do a triple jump. That's how the level starts. We run forwards, hold up, and do a triple jump. So you see this line is where you want to start the triple jump. It's like when you run past this line on the ground, it's a very simple cue for starting the triple jump. Hold A for as long as you can. Well, you know, for as long as it takes to get a full jump. You can see what a full jump looks like here. But basically just need to hold A for long enough. I think the amount it takes to get a full jump is 7 frames. So if you're holding A for that long, you're good. And then you basically, yeah, the inputs here are then double jump with A and triple jump with A and B at the same time. That's a triple jump dive, I should say. And each of those inputs, I believe, is a 4-frame window, so you don't have to like hit it perfectly, you just have to basically get the triple jump dive out. You know, it can be a bit tricky from landing on, because the more you hesitate on the triple jump, the more you kind of get slid around by the platforms that are sliding left and right, so it's worth being mindful of that, just to make sure you don't get thrown too off course and stay broadly in the middle. Next, right, after we've done that, my emulator almost froze. Here we want to do a rollout by pressing A when we land here. I can't remember if I zoomed the camera out actually on this save state. Yeah, well I have this save state. This is a bit too far forward. Let me make another one real quick. Yeah, so this is about what you want, ideally. So when we land, we're gonna roll out by pressing A for a short period of time. It doesn't have to be 1 frame, like a frame perfect press that's only pressing A for 1 frame, but it should be pretty short. Usually this means about 3 frames. You can kind of see it here. I'm doing these short presses. A long press would look like this. It would send me, if I hold A for a long time, which is to say 5 frames is the maximum you can hold A for a rollout, to get the biggest rollouts, it would send you too far into the wall, right? And so that's what we're, in order to space a bit better, so maximum rollout is kind of lands around here. A sort of fairly small rollout lands around here, which is what we want. And then we input a spin jump dive. Spin the stick while you're in the air. As long as the whole spin is done within 10 frames before you press A, you should get a spin. And, you know, try to not be doing the spin when you land. So spin in the middle of the air to get this input. And then I've not been doing it right here, but what you should do here is slide your thumb from A to B in order to get over get the spin jump dive over this wall. It does work sometimes with just pressing A, B at the same time, but the problem is the trajectory cuts into the wall. Like, it can basically smash into the wall because the trajectory is flatter than if you delay it slightly, in which case it's kind of, you cover less distance, but the peak of the jump is further back, and so it's easier to get over the wall. So basically this input, let me try that, short A press and then slide your thumb from A to B. If you find yourself bonking on the wall, then slow down the slide a little bit, just kind of like this. So it's not really that I'm doing it the very next frame, it's just slightly slowed down thumb movement, but I'm still sliding my thumb from A to B. So then we need to do a rollout. So again, we're going to hold A for at least 5 frames. But if we do the rollout immediately, depending on where we landed, there is a chance that we're gonna, let me show this, grab the edge of the cube, and that just means we rolled out too far back. So we want to, in order to guarantee that this doesn't happen, we want to make sure we space our rollout here, right? So when Mario is about as far as he can be here, it doesn't have to really be grinding right on the edge, but it's just like Mario is kind of what you would consider to be right at the edge in a diving position. So like not there, a bit further back is fine, like this kind of position, right? That's where you want to roll out when Mario hits this kind of position. If you're further back than that, then you'll notice you're in danger of not making it. Like this, for example, didn't make it. But yeah, if we make sure we're right on the edge, we should clear here, have no problems. And then jump dive. Let me... Oh yeah, actually, hang on. What I wanted to say about this as well, you see how I can actually see where I'm landing just about. If I'd zoomed the camera out even further, I'd be able to really see where I'm landing. And so this is the point of zooming the camera out. If you do this on default zoom, if you don't touch the C stick, then you have to basically feel, you can't see the edge. And so you have to basically feel how much you're going to delay and do it by feel, which is worse. So basically you have to choose, am I going to zoom out the camera and see where I'm rolling out here? See the edge of the platform and make sure that I roll out correctly? Or am I going to not zoom the camera in, and in order to, you know, not mess up the inputs at the beginning of the level, and then dive, and then feel when I'm going to roll out without being able to see it. So it's just a choice that you have to make. Unfortunately, there's not really a right answer to that. But ideally, if you can, definitely zoom the camera out. I've not really zoomed it out enough here, which means the kind of edge takes me by surprise a bit as the camera moves. So I would actually recommend zooming the camera out even more than this, so you can really see where you are. Next thing, right? I think this might be a better camera zoom. So I'm gonna, yeah, I think this is a bit nicer. So here you can see I can really confirm that I've landed on the edge, and if I were here, I could just slide a little bit further in order, like if I say I hold back here deliberately, if I'm here, then I know I can just slide a bit further and get it basically. Actually, let me actually just real quick, I want to demonstrate what it looks like when you have to slide on the ground, like I was describing. It's basically like this. There we go. You see the slide that I did there? You can definitely, as long as you're holding forward the whole time, you can definitely slide for a good amount of time, like at least a second. You can spend sliding there to make sure that you get right against the edge. So, all right. So so we're here then. And when we land on this cube, we just do a jump dive with A and B, and then as long as in this position, basically just nudge the stick to the right while you're in the air. Just nudge it upright, and then you'll land on this cube. And that has the advantage that this cube moves more slowly than the other one, so you can be later and still make it. This was something I used to get tripped up on a lot as a beginner, that I would never actually make it onto the cube on the left. I would always be too slow for it. So just tilting to the right is going to fix that for you. And just be aware here that if you get moves about by all these platforms, left and right here, you might be a little bit off, and you might be like a little bit too far left here for this to work very easily, but it's just something to bear in mind. So once we've done that, jump dive, so full rollout here, 5 frames, jump dive and nudge to the right, and then full rollout again brings us here. And from this position, the inputs here are pretty straightforward. First, jump dive. Jump dive and rollout. Dive, rollout, dive, rollout. So you have to be careful here that if you're sloppy with your inputs, then you are not going to be able to do full rollouts holding A for 5 frames at least. The amount you hold B, by the way, never makes a difference, but the amount you hold A gives you bigger and smaller rollouts, and that's how we can adjust on the runway section here. So if I do fully big rollouts, it looks like this. There we go. With good inputs, it still works, but you know, you're going to be sliding and walking around a bit, particularly as a beginner. So you have to be mindful that the more you slide about, and so like this, for example, this is called eating dust when you roll out late, and when you walk before doing the next jump dive. The more you do that, the further along the runway you will be relative to the cycle of jumping and diving, and the more you will have to cut the length of your rollouts in order to fit. That's basically what you want to do there. So like I said, if I'm doing just long rollouts, it looks like this. If I'm doing just short rollouts, it looks like this. So you see I landed a lot further back in the end. Like my dive is all the way back here. Whereas if I'm doing long rollouts, I could just barely sort of fit into the platform before I had to roll out before sliding off the end. So that's how you space on the runway, basically. And then the ending is very simple. You just jump, dive, roll out. Try to make sure while you're on the runway, you kind of center yourself by just drifting slightly while doing rollouts and that kind of thing. And yeah, that's basically it. Jump, dive, roll out, and jump, dive. And you can take a few steps and eat a bit of dust between the jumps and the dives here. It's not a problem. And that's the level. Just something to be aware of as well is with the shine grab. If you find yourself quite far back depth-wise, then this might not make it. You can basically do a ground pound just as you're grabbing the shine in order to grab it still, basically here. This was actually too far back, but like if I kind of am about to land between this post and the shine and I'm diving down in this position, then I can grab the shine by ground pounding. I'm surprised that didn't work actually. Hang on, let me try to show it. Yeah, like that. And the reason this works is because when you ground pound, Mario sits down and his hitbox, and which grabs the shine and whatever, it doesn't change, but the bottom of the hitbox, which is usually where his feet are, just becomes where his butt is. And so his hitbox basically extends over his head because the size remains the same. It just kind of moves up instantaneously. And so you can grab things from above by ground pounding, which you're going to see a lot in this game. It's worth understanding why that happens. Yeah, that's that. The last thing I wanted to show off was a backup cycle, basically. So the backup, wait, I'll zoom the camera out. The backup cycle, there is one backup cycle that I want to show off. It's particularly useful in the event that you get this triple jump, but for whatever reason you bonk here. Basically, I'm going to walk off and just do a triple jump dive like this. There's not really much to explain about that. It's fairly intuitive, and the ending movement, let me actually try to remember what the best ending movement is to do here. So I'll make another save state once I get over the top, right? So I'm doing the triple jump here, and like okay, I was trying to bonk there. For whatever reason I bonk, basically, like for example, you can bonk just by dropping the spin put sometimes, which does happen. Basically, run over the top here and then you can jump on these platforms. So the platforms that we're aiming for the backup cycle are the two that are basically standing in place and moving up and down. So this one, and then there's one here that's doing exactly the same thing. And so yeah, provided on this cycle, assuming we bonked on this wall, best way to, I guess, if you're too close to the wall, you might want to consider just running around a little bit to get some space. As long as it's falling down, it's quite easy to fit this in. And yeah, then the inputs, or you could do, well, okay, don't do that. Because yeah, just run forwards. There's no need to do anything else. The cycle is it's actually nicer if you run forward than if you're faster. Jump, dive, roll out, jump, dive. This is a little bit tricky. I remember this section, when you're doing the backup, is a little annoying, basically. So let me just real quick guide you through that as well. So triple jump here, long roll out, jump dive, long roll out, dive, roll out, walk a bit here. You know, just take a few steps so that you make sure you're on the star. you're landing in the correct position. Like, and here you can actually, it's probably best to eat some dust so that you roll out quite close to the end of here, like this. And it is more lenient if you're on the left, I remember that. So like drift into the left and then just, you have plenty of space in order to finish the movement off. And you get yourself a nice 18, which is, well, you're losing about 3.5 in fact, seconds compared to the normal strat, so it's not awful if that happens. So like, that's a backup that's worth bearing in mind. If you kind of do things like this, you can still make this backup actually. You're a bit too fast for it. This is like, if I'm saying if you miss the triple jump, and just like run and jump over everything. So slow down a bit here actually, just to make sure that these platforms are falling down, which just makes the cycle more lenient. And I've forgotten what to do on the runway, but just whatever I said a minute ago, do that. Don't do what I just improvised here. Yeah, and if you're really not sure about the cycle, right, if you've really messed everything up, kind of have to wait here, then it's best to, whoops, my bad, it's best to jump on this platform, and then when it gets to near the top, or even if it's actually just going up, you should still be safe to do this. Basically, do a spin jump dive from standing position, and the way to do this is you press B, and during this action, while Mario is grabbing the air, you can't move, just for a bit. And so if you B spin and then messed it up there, hang on. But basically this, right? B spin jump dive should give you a spin jump dive there. So basically, you know, you'd wait for this to be at the top and then just do that. And then when you do that, just remember these platforms do move. So you have to be really careful where you're standing. You have to improvise that and basically stand between the cubes when they're sliding about. But on the normal cycle and also the backup cycle that I showed, you don't have to worry about the cubes at all. So it's all good. And that's that. That is everything for the basics. And the last thing I want to show here is, well, I say show actually. I'm not going to talk about strats for this level anymore. Rather, I wanted to take the opportunity to talk a bit, to use this tutorial, right, as an excuse to teach a bit of movement fundamentals. So this is the kind of knowledge that you gain, the experience that you gain as you improve your movement in this game and understand what is fast. And I feel like this level, with its fairly simple selection of strats, is a good starting point, basically. So this is the stuff that I want to talk about. Oh, yeah. I do remember when I was starting out, I used to have all these questions about, like, for example, why do my inputs not fit on the runway? I'm doing all the same things Samurai Man is doing, but they just don't fit. I keep sliding off the end. So that's kind of the point of teaching a bit of fundamentals, is to give people the knowledge that they need in order to figure out their own movements and what they're doing wrong and how to improve and how to learn strats going forward. And so let's do it. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the buffered spin. So I've spoke in a couple of cases about a buffered spin, but like this, right? Let me make a save state. Sometimes, because I make save states with my feet pressing the spacebar, sometimes it just doesn't press. Bruh, that definitely should have pressed. Why didn't it work? Sometimes this keyboard takes the piss. One sec. Yep, so here, right? Here, you know, I input, while I'm in the air, I input a spin and then do the jump dive, and that gives me a spin jump dive. Every spin in the game is buffered, essentially. An A press can give you a spin, like whether I'm spinning just doing a spin jump, and at any point during the jump I can dive, and that would then become a spin jump dive. But a spin always happens when you press A. It's also possible to happen on wall kicks, provided that you have inputted a spin within the previous 10 frames before the A press. I think it's 10 frames not including the A press, I'm not sure, but it's not too important. So you have a third of a second basically to input the spin. And technically speaking, what a spin is means the analog stick direction matches with, the analog stick is basically pointing in the directions in the stage. And you need all of the 4 cardinal directions to be represented in your spin, in your 10 frames, which is, X and Z, up and down, left and right, which basically splits the world into like a diagonal quadrant here. And so you need all of those quadrants to be, you need to have pointed your stick in each of those 4 quadrants within the 10 frames. So it's not a question of just inputting up, down, left, and right. It's more a question of that you have pointed basically northwest, south, and east within the spin put. I'm going to link a video that Trey made that gives an in-depth discussion on all of the different types of spin puts, and it's a very interesting video. So every spin is buffered in the sense that the spin comes before the A press, but what we mean when we say a buffered spin is the buffer happened in a fairly inactionable time. So like if we're in midair and I do a spin, I barely affect Mario's trajectory, he just kind of drifts a little bit left and right. Whereas if I'm on the ground and I do a spin, I basically turn around completely, and that's what is referred to as a non-buffered spin. So this spin jump dive that I was teaching here is basically something that is done completely buffered, right? The whole spin is done before we land, and that means that we do not lose our direction. And it's really important to learn to do these spin jumps in such a way that you continue at first pointing forwards, but later on you will learn to spin like left and right as well, or like at any angle really. Backwards. Oh yeah, technically speaking, I should say you're not allowed to hit neutral in your 10 frames in order to get a spin. Hitting neutral kills the spin, unthought. So mostly spins are buffered in the air, but I also gave the example on the backup cycle that you can buffer a spin during a grab, because that freezes Mario in place and lets you input a spin as well, which is really, it's actually going to be an important fundamental to have on some of the later secrets where you're on moving platforms and you need to dismount them. The safest way to do it is to input the grab and then spin like this. So this was the example that I was giving. Like if I'm standing on like this sliding platform, for example, you can input a spin by jumping and then doing this, right, like this. But then obviously the ground beneath your feet kind of moves, right? And you can avoid that by buffering out of a grab, which is useful. Later on, we're going to learn about buffering and then taking steps. Like buffer a spin in the air and then where am I? Where's a good place to show this off? Here. Like buffer a spin while in the air or while pressing B. And then do the spin really late so that you take a few steps before doing the actual jump. And this actually gives you more speed than just not taking steps, because Mario gets to accelerate a little bit. You see H and V, those are his horizontal and vertical speeds in the data display. When you're standing, Mario accelerates up to his walking speed. And so if you can take a few steps before the spin, you get more speed from it. However, on this level, I would recommend not doing that. And in fact, sometimes it is better to not do that. Sometimes it is better to do that. And that is something for another day. That's a bit more advanced. But you can, if you're interested, look at the Dutch J tutorial, which explains, I will also link that, and it explains how to take steps during spins, buffer them late, and get a bit of extra speed sometimes. Yep, okay, next section. Next thing I wanted to talk about is, I've already mentioned this, but basically if you can jump from anywhere from 1 frame, which is hard to actually do consistently, to 7 frames. That's the biggest possible jump. Like if you just hold A, you'll get the maximum size jump. Same is true of rollouts. You can go from it, let me do it on the runway actually. Call this bit the runway. Yeah, so here I can do this, actually can't really see from the cube, but basically small rollouts or a large rollout. You can see the difference between them is very obvious, right? Small rollouts, large rollout. So anywhere between 1 and 5 frames. Yeah. And yeah, pretty much when you're jumping or double jumping or doing a rollout, you can, or doing a wall kick. So jump, single jump, double jump, rollout, and wall kick, I think are the things that are affected by this. The amount of time that you press A will affect the size of the jump and the rollout, right? So what do I mean by size? I mean it gives you more horizontal and vertical speed. And so you end up covering more distance in both because of horizontal and vertical speeds. So there's a really important principle to jumps, which is that, so here I'm talking just about jumps. Single jump, double jump, spin jump, and triple jump. Although the amount you hold A does not affect how big a spin jump is. It's not one of the single jump, double jump, wall kick, and rollout that I mentioned. However, every kind of jump is affected by this. So this is, I'm not sure actually about wall kicks probably, but single jump, double jump, spin jump, and triple jump. Triple jump also doesn't matter how long you hold A, you always get the same triple jump. But the important principle for these jumps is that the speed with the horizontal speed you have when you jump correlates to both the horizontal and vertical speed that you exit the jump out of. So horizontal speed in, proportional, not necessarily linearly, but there's some function I don't know, proportional to horizontal speed and vertical speed out, both horizontal and vertical out. H speed in, H and V speed out. And that's important because it means that well, among other things, one of the most important corollaries of this, right, is that if you land the jump on the first frame, you press it on the first frame you can on landing, you will always carry more speed than if you wait a bit, because waiting will slow you down. It's due to the horizontal speed. You can see, like, here I have a rollout at the beginning of this save state. It has a 55 speed. As soon as I start walking, it slows down to Mario's walking speed, which is around 30. So if I jump immediately on the rollout, I will get a bigger jump. So like I'm doing a full jump, full A press. Jump immediately on the rollout gives you more speed than like walking and then jumping, right? And yeah, so often people talk about first frame jumps. Those will give you the biggest horizontal and vertical speed, and so the biggest distance. I think I said this earlier, but double jump window is 4 frames. Triple jump window is also 4 frames. But if you're not moving fast enough, if you're like moving really slowly, and then you won't get a triple jump, you'll just get a single jump again. Triple jump also has a speed requirement going into it, which I can't remember what it is, but basically this is the reason you can't do a triple jump in place. But you can do a double jump in place. Right, so this is important on this section here. because in different parts of the run, how long you hold A will, and also like how late you press A after you land, will affect how much speed you get. And it's worth just being cognizant that this is happening. Like if I really do short A presses, I'm not going to make it. This is why I was saying like I do long A presses. And also if you hit these presses frame perfectly, you will get a decent bit extra distance. And so that might affect your spacing forwards and backwards. And it's worth bearing in mind. That's why that's happening. Okay. That's that. Next thing I want to talk about is dives and rollouts, right? So this rule that I said about speed preservation on landing, it does loosely apply to dives and rollouts, but there is a specific important difference, which is that a dive will always preserve, like I'm talking only about aerial dives. Running dives are a different thing, which is not really that important to know about. But when it comes to aerial dives, the vertical speed of an aerial dive is again correlated to the horizontal speed you enter it into. But the horizontal speed of a dive is fixed to whatever the number is. What was it again? I think it's 47. 48? Yeah, 48. So you can see here, when I do this triple jump, I'm always going to get 48. That's quite distinctive, or it's around 48. And then while you're in midair, it does like change slightly, so it doesn't stay constant, based on a few technical things that I won't go into here. If you're interested in knowing, basically, the function that determines determines speeds in the air, has a fixed point around 56, and so if you're slower than 56, Mario always gets faster slowly as he's in the air. That's just a curious fact. And also the rate at which his speed increases or decreases is heavily affected by the stick direction you're holding in the air. So in order to preserve speed correctly, you always want to be holding in the direction that Mario is going in, which usually means, like in this level, just holding forward and going straight. But in different situations, you would want to hold in the direction Mario is moving in order to preserve speed. But yeah. So the dive fixes the speed, the horizontal speed. The rollout fixes both the horizontal and the vertical speed. And this is important because, why did I say, like, if I'm here, then I can basically guarantee that I'm going to land in this exact same place when I roll out, depending on where I rolled out from, as long as I hold forward again. This is extremely useful in the game in general, because it basically guarantees spacing. It guarantees where you're going to land, and so you can use it in different setups. Like, for example, this setup where I can be sure I'm always going to land on this cube. It's also useful here because you can always very precisely control where you're going to land with dives and rollouts, using the rollout length. And yeah, so it's important to remember that. You know, for most kinds of jumps, or like all kinds of jumps, single jump, double jump, triple jump, spin jump, the speed you get coming out, both horizontally and vertically, depends on the speed coming in. For a dive, the vertical speed depends on it, but the horizontal is fixed. And for a rollout, neither speed depends on it. All are fixed, and they are determined exclusively by the length of the A press. And you have 5 different options, and in fact you can actually read off the vertical speeds exactly what size rollout you got. There's a pattern. I'm going to link to a document that JPEG made that basically talks about all the different rollout patterns, and it talks about a lot of movement technicalities you'll find interesting to read about, but it's definitely quite a technical document. It talks about things that are beyond the scope of a beginner, certainly, but it's basically gives you a table that lets you read the length of a rollout from the speed display, which is quite useful when you're analyzing individual level speedruns. Yep, so I'm just reading my notes to check if I've covered everything. Vertical path of... Yeah, so one thing I want to talk about regarding dives is that a dive that is done in midair is basically, you know, this is still a jump in many ways. So like when I do a jump dive, this is like I'm jumping and then diving. This is very much the same inputs. I know it kind of seems like a jump dive is a much more consistent input than a jump, which can really be just about anything. Part of the consistency is achieved by the fact that pressing B in midair, basically what it does is it fixes the horizontal speed to 48, like I said, but it doesn't otherwise affect the jump at all. So the vertical trajectory of the jump remains exactly the same, but the speed of the jump changes at the exact point that you press B. This is why like jump dives where you press A and B at the same time look very consistent, but jumping and then diving can give you all sorts of different results depending on like if I did a tiny jump here, or if I did a big jump and then press dive. Like I can press B the same number of frames after A, but depending on how long I held A, I will get a different kind of jump dive. Same goes for spin jump dives. So in fact, in this level, this is important. Like I said, in this section, so this spin jump dive, you know, you often with this spin jump dive, you risk bonking if you press A and B at the same time, because pressing B right at the beginning sets the horizontal speed to a high number right from the outset. If I just do a spin jump, I get the horizontal speed of around 33, 34. But pressing B sets it to 48, and so I basically accelerate at that point. And what that means is if I press B as early as possible, I get the most distance, but I also get this really flat trajectory that is in danger of bonking the wall. And that's why we slide our thumb from A to B, to basically get over the wall. But we try not to delay the B press too much, or otherwise it really cuts down on our spacing. Like, you're going to be eating a lot of dust if you do that, right? Nonetheless, the peak, because the dive part doesn't actually affect the vertical pattern of the jump at all, every frame the vertical speeds are the same, that means the jump peaks in the same place, at the same time, and with the same height, no matter when you dive during the jump. It's just that the horizontal distance at which the peak happens is further the earlier you dive, right? Makes sense. So it kind of squashes the trajectory if you delay the dive, and that lets you clear the wall. That's basically that. I wanted to mention that like rollouts typically have a speed of 55 horizontal speed. It fixes the horizontal speed and it fixes the kind of height that you get vertically. Dives always set your speed to 48 as well. And jumps, oh yeah, and Mario's walking oscillates between like 26 and 32, I think are the numbers, or 33, something like that. And then jumps typically just preserve speed according to what you had coming in, the horizontal speed according to some complicated formulas I can't be bothered with, but you get all sorts of different numbers. A good momentum spin is typically like 44 horizontal speeds, and yeah, when you have flood, you can get to 100 by doing a water slide. So there's all sorts of things. But yeah, I hope I can help. Basically, I hope I've been able to help just by explaining all of the, just a few fundamentals basically to get started with. And hopefully that'll help you understand what's going on when you mess up in Bianco 3, and how the strat works, what the purpose is of all the inputs that I taught for the strats, and yeah, hopefully it sets you in good stead to then learn the rest of the movement. You know, when you get into flood and all these things, it gets pretty deep and interesting. And also, hopefully you pick up some ILs, because those are the highest skill aspects of SMS and the most fun for me personally, so that's why I wanted to bait people into it a bit by giving an introduction to movement in SMS on the end of this Bianco 3 strat. But that is everything. I'm pretty sure I've covered everything I wanted to, so leave it there. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you soon.